Hello everybody, my name is Chris Dudley and I'm a real estate agent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Penn Fed Realty. I wanted to talk to you today about the buyer-broker agreement that is signed in Maryland, Virginia and DC, but also across the rest of the country. The reason I want to talk to you about it is because I recently had some new buyers say to me, we're not going to sign this agreement. You're forcing us to sign this agreement. I don't want to sign it because I can do this by myself, among other things. If you are in Maryland or DC, just so you can look this up online, so it's not just me saying it, type it into Google, buyer agency agreement in Maryland or DC. Well, it's going to tell you the first thing here. Yes, a buyer agency agreement is required by law if a buyer chooses to be represented by an agent when using the G-Car sales contract in Montgomery County, Maryland, or Washington, D.C. Required by law. Let's look. The same thing, Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. Yes, Virginia law requires written buyer-broker agreements. As of August 17th, 2024, laws changed. The first one was pertaining to the buyer agency agreement, and the second portion was pertaining to compensation. Let's talk about buyer agency agreements. We're going to talk about two different kinds. First of all, in Maryland and DC. When you're in Maryland and DC, you are required to sign a buyer-broker agreement. There's only one part I want to talk about on that section, and that is the compensation section, because that is what this new law is all about, signing a buyer brokerage agreement and compensation. So, on the buyer broker agreement in Maryland and DC, you are required to sign number 4 here, stating buyer agrees that the buyer broker shall receive a compensation of X amount of the sales price. I will talk about that more when I have you in front of me and it's direct about each property. In Maryland and DC, we have a little subheading which is great here, and you have two choices. The first one is buyer shall pay broker compensation as an additional closing cost at settlement. That's the first option. And the second option is buyer shall seek payment of broker compensation from the seller. This is usually the one which all of my clients go for. Since August 17th, 2024, the change that happened was that before that, compensation was offered by the seller and it was noted on the MLS. Buyer agents as well as buyers knew how much they were getting paid when they wrote offers on the property. Now, nothing is listed anywhere, and when we write on a property, we are asking the seller to pay our compensation. Has that changed? Yes, nothing is now written online. However, we are still finding 99% of the time that sellers are still paying our compensation. I will show you shortly how we can ask for that to be done on the contract. In a Virginia buyer-broker agreement, the compensation section is different. It still has buyer-broker compensation that the buyer will pay a broker an amount of X amount of the percent, but that's it. There's nothing else on there. We still do the same as Maryland and DC. We ask the seller to pay for it. How do we do that? Well, let's take a look. Here, as we're on Virginia, is the residential sales contract for Virginia. And here we put down price and financing, what we're offering, the down payment, how much you're putting down, what you're financing, how much you're putting down in financing. But the two important ones are here, seller subsidy. If you're asking the seller to pay any closing costs, you put it here. But if you want the seller to pay your broker compensation, your buyer broker compensation, you would put it here. Anywhere between what you have on your agreement up to a max amount. And you put that on there, and usually this is what we're asking the seller to pay on your behalf. In DC and in Maryland, it is a separate addendum, and it basically says seller agrees to pay buyer broker a broker's compensation equal to the percentage, a dollar amount, or both of those. So this would be a separate thing, and if it's agreed to, it gets signed by the seller. However, just a reminder, on your buyer-broker agreement, you are stating that you, as a buyer, are responsible for the compensation in the event that the seller does not pay. Since August 17th, 2024, To the end of that year, I sold 25 properties, and every single one of those properties, I wrote into the contract that the seller would pay my compensation, and that was done each time. So, if you're worried about having to pay for your buyer, that could happen, but for the most part, as sellers want to be able to have potentially multiple offers on their property, they are still offering it. While it may not be written somewhere, when we write in our offer, it is generally being accepted. If you would like more information about the law that took place, you can Google it, of course, but here's just one document I want you to take a look at. And this is the Consumer Guide about why you're being asked to sign a written buyer agreement. It's very simple, it's very clear. It explains what it's about and how it benefits you. You should read this, take your time, Google it, learn about it. Here's another one from the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. You can just type in top 10 highlights from the NAR settlement practice changes, and it will bring down everything about compensation, buyer broker agreements. But ultimately, our goal as realtors is to serve your best interests, and we want to make sure that you have a buyer broker agreement that protects your interests, and we want to help you buy a house. We want to make sure that you're not being steered in the wrong direction, and this is the starting point. Once you have your buyer broker agreement signed, you get pre-qualified, you see houses, you write an offer, everything is transparent, nothing is left off the table. But we're here to help you, and I want to make sure that you're aware of this law moving forward as you buy a house. Only because it is not something which you're being forced to sign, it's only something that you have to sign by law to see houses. If an agent is showing you houses and you have not signed this agreement, they are breaking the law. This is Chris Dudley with the Dudley Real Estate Group. I look forward to speaking with you about buying real estate in the future. Let me know if you have any questions, and take care. Bye, guys.